Tall Tales for Perspiring Teachers by Michael Baldwin.
There's the school, light shining from every window, as usual. God, what a waste of electricity. Oh, it's so dark. Can't see a thing. There's not far to go now. Just at the end of the drive. What damn! Oh, my hand. God, that hurts. I can see that bloody pothole. Should have fixed that. Always having to fix things. The bastards. It's always me. I tell you, without me, that school couldn't function. They couldn't run an old farts darts team. No organisation. No strategic planning. No balls. I'll show them. How dare they come begging to me? Sort this out. Sort that out. Army training. That's what. The lights are going out. There's a can of petrol in the barn. Must be some left. Oh, it's so heavy. I should use a wheelbarrow. It's too noisy. No noise. Where's the bloody door? Oh, I can't see in the dark. Up we go. Take it easy there, soldier. Don't give your position away. Into the hall. Perfect. Now, where's my lighter? Oh, shit, I must have left it at the pub. No, here we are. Slipped down the lining. Must get a new jacket. Some hope on the pittance they pay. Bastards. Steady now. Not too much. There. Why does that go so fast? Right. Know the drill, soldier. Sound the alarm. That's it. In tools. Chins up, chests out, army style. Good show, chaps. Credit to your regiment. All present and correct, sir. Carried out like a true soldier, sir. Not one of your bloody teachers, sir. Never wanted to be a teacher, sir.
Chapter 1. Westcliffe, October 1966. I started teaching for all the wrong reasons. Just left school. Nothing to do. A year to kill before going to university. Bored and broke. Teaching solved a lot of problems at once. The state sector wouldn't employ me, but the private sector might. I'd been at one, so I knew only too well how unfussy prep schools could be about selecting their staff. It was going to be difficult to find anywhere that would take me, as the autumn term had begun some 3 weeks before. However, via Gabbitas and Thring Education Agency, I arrived at Westcliffe School to take up my duties as senior French master. Senior? Who on earth was my junior? A pupil? After a brief tour of the classrooms, the head introduced me to a young woman, dressed in crisply starched linen. "This is Greta," he explained. "She will show you to your room." "Show the gentleman to his room, Greta." "His room? The gentleman?" "Yes, that's right. To his room." He turned to me. "She's Swedish. Hasn't got much of a handle on the language yet. But she's coming along." Greta turned her head towards us inquiringly. "I said you're coming along." "No, to his room. That's it. We'll see you later." The head often used the royal we. She took me through the school to the backyard where there was a small, isolated cottage. It smelt of mud and sweat. A man was standing in the open doorway of the bathroom, in a filthy towel. "Your room," said Greta, pointing into a room, in which were cheap lace curtains, a linoleum floor, and a bed. She left. I stood facing the man in the towel. He held out a muddy hand. "I'm Gordon," he said. "I take it you're the new French master." "Yes, that's right." "Well, I hope you last longer than your predecessor." It occurred to me for the first time that his term had been in progress for 3 weeks already. Someone might have been teaching French for just that long. "There was someone here before you," said Gordon, reading my thoughts. "What happened to him?" "He just left. Couldn't stand it. He was a bilingual French-Canadian with excellent qualifications and a great deal of experience. After 4 days he was violently rude to the head, matron and the vicar. After 6 days he walked out and caught the first plane back to Canada." "Oh," I said. "What went wrong?" "He actually liked teaching French, so he couldn't stand it here. No resources, no support. You'll be lucky if you can squeeze a box of chalk out of the vicar." "I'd have left myself, but I'm just filling in time before I decide whether to take a training course." "You mean you're not trained?" "Oh, heavens no. I haven't had time for all that. Besides, nobody here is trained except for the maths teacher. Not even the head is trained. Listen, why not come and meet the others?" The staff common room was directly beneath the headmaster's study. In it were 5 men, all sitting, smoking, and reading, except for the major, who pulled at his moustache. They all rose to greet me, except the major, who was deaf. One of them offered me a cigarette. I sat down and began reading the remaining paper. A few days later, a 17-year-old with French O-level arrived. As I was 18 and had French A-level, I was senior French master, and he my junior in our department. My subordinate wasn't very good at French, but he had a gift for making model space rockets out of cardboard. As time went by, I got to know the staff with their individual foibles. All were curious, and none more so than Gordon. He was a small, busy man in his mid-20s, who smoked 40 cigarettes a day, drawing on them so heavily that they caved in just above the place where his nicotine-stained fingers held them. The black trousers of his suit were always a bit crumpled. His shoes had seen better days, but the toe caps were polished and curled upwards defiantly. He wore a tie with small rifles all over it, which he explained was regimental. His room was full of books about military history, and he often displayed his knowledge of campaigns, strategies, and the heroic deeds of military men. He told me he had attended Sandhurst, hoping to train as an army officer. However, he had left there in circumstances that remained a mystery. As his father had been a major in the army, Gordon already carried with him the shame of letting down his family. Gordon was a man of action. He was a man for that moment of crisis when all others would be rendered impotent by fear and uncertainty. However, lacking teaching qualifications, he had no hope of obtaining employment in a state school or in any of the reputable private ones. The head knew this and ruthlessly exploited Gordon's need to be the man of the moment. "Gordon, there's a bull loose in the playing field. Be a good chap and get rid of it." "Gordon, a tree has fallen onto the tennis court. Get the tractor out and shift it. Oh, one more thing. Do be careful how you go. There's a boy trapped underneath it. Run him into hospital afterwards and get him checked out. Broken limbs, that sort of thing. Gordon, There's a layer of slime at the bottom of the swimming pool. It needs cleaning." The head got his money's worth out of Gordon. The head got his money's worth out of everything. To him, the school was a business venture. He was, in fact, a businessman, and not a teacher at all. He had previously worked for ICI until his health demanded that he work from home. Running a prep school was the ideal solution. First of all, he carried out his market research thoroughly. From the results, he discovered that in South Hampshire there was a surfeit of nouveaux riches and a dearth of private schools. The nouveaux riches to which he aimed to cater were not really interested in education as such. What they wanted was status for their children, and he was going to sell it to them. With his double-barrel surname, his tailored three-piece tweed suits, his well-groomed blonde locks, and his smooth, authoritative voice. To complete the package, he had purchased a fine Elizabethan mansion, set in lush, landscaped parklands, equipped with a swimming pool, tennis courts, and a space for football and rugby pitches. This was clearly a place where the Astors, the Clivedens, or the Guinnesses might once have gathered for their weekend jollifications. The house was approached by a quarter of a mile of sandy drive through the park, culminating in a gravel forecourt which would produce the most reassuring crunch under the wheels of a Rover saloon. Accompanied by a pair of gleaming black Labradors, the head would lead prospective parents for an hour or two around the house and gardens, showing them the finer points of the great hall and the 16th century open fireplace. In the process, he would casually refer to Eton, Winchester, and Harrow, cricket matches at Lord's, days spent in Ascot and Henley, coming out balls and gentlemen's clubs. If the conversation should veer too close to the sordid subject of what went on in the classroom, he would brush them off with reassurances about his highly qualified and devoted staff. On one occasion, when a parent insisted on examining the maths textbooks and talking to the maths teacher in person, the head suggested quickly that this might not, after all, be the place for their little boy, and hurried them back to their car. After they had vanished, he roared into the staff room and announced to all that people like that had no hope of getting their boy into his school. "One bad apple and the whole barrel goes rotten," he stated firmly. "You only need one set of parents asking a lot of silly questions about things they don't understand, and they'll all be at it. The next thing you know, they'll be sticking their noses through the classroom door and asking if they can help their little brat with his sums. Then they'll be telling us all what to teach and how to teach it. No. Parents have their uses, but they must be kept well clear of the actual business of education." It was the only time such an incident occurred, for the great majority of his clients were so entranced by the prospects of their little chap becoming a gentleman and mixing with the likes of Bertie Wooster that cheque-books were soon and willingly produced. I would suggest paying a year in advance if you really want to be sure that we can keep a place for him, the head would murmur softly as his client fumbled for a pen. Living and working at the school was almost like living on an island. It was separated culturally, socially, and economically from the surrounding neighbourhood. Once a week, everything from herring roes to the staff's cigarettes and the major's whisky came in by lorry from Southampton. Nobody had a car, except the head. The weekly visits of the cricket coach represented a link with the outside world. The maths teacher had a bicycle on which he escaped to Winchester one night a week. He was kind enough to lend it to me once in a while. He also taught me how to roll cigarettes with dark shag. You could get this at the local pub, where you could also buy beer, bread and cheese. As the pub was within walking distance, it became the natural retreat from the bizarre and enclosed world of the school. Otherwise, Gordon would never have stopped plotting battle strategies on the blackboard in his classroom. However, my junior colleague, a teetotaler, remained in his room and so perfected his skills at rocket design that he was able to pass on some of the finer points to the children. To my pupils, I even managed to teach a little French, written French, that is. I still can't speak it properly, but no one seemed to mind, and this was before the days of language laboratories and tapes, so no one would have known the difference. I learnt very little about teaching techniques, as I was simply regurgitating the grammar I had been taught only a few years before from a teacher who had learnt his French grammar in the 1920s. My only real teaching challenge came when I was asked to take a lesson once a week with a group of 5-year-olds. There were 10 of these creatures in the class, and I had to read to them or tell them stories. I say creatures because they didn't appear to react like human beings, let alone intelligent ones. They lived in an alien, barbaric, and wholly irrational world. They seemed to be already at the last stages of those children in the novel The Lord of the Flies. My first clue to their nature came after I read them the story of the mongoose, Rikki-Tikki-Tavi, in the Jungle Books. They sat open-mouthed and silent as they listened. Some time later I came across them, beating hell out of a rubbish dump with sticks and screaming,
"Death to Nag! Death to Nagaina! Kill her babies!"
On another occasion, I had to supervise them in a game of cricket. While I was debating a tricky umpiring decision, a small boy approached. His arm was covered in blood. There was a nasty wound. "Quentin Roberts bit me, sir," he said, without any sign of emotion. He was neither sad, angry, nor apparently in pain, yet the blood was red enough. As I rushed him to the tender care of Matron and the gentian Violet, I wondered briefly if these creatures felt things in the same way as the rest of us. Nevertheless, Matron in her starched white uniform gave no sign that anything unusual had taken place, so I hurried back to my charges before worse could arise. The moment of reckoning came a month later, when I was foolish enough to join in their game instead of remaining in the adult role of umpire. While attempting a run, I slipped and fell to the ground. Before I could move, a gang of little boys, the devil in their eyes, were tearing at my shirt, kicking me and screaming,
"Rip him to bits! Rip him to bits!"
With the strength of the desperate, I rose to my feet. My oppressors slunk away with a guilty look of those who have momentarily exposed their innermost lusts, but who have been prevented from gratifying them by the appearance of a force even greater than their own. Later that day, I asked the head to be transferred from that class. "I think they need someone who is trained to do preschool," I said. He got Matron to take charge of them, and they were never heard of again. Until, that is, an Aberdeen Angus bull from a neighbouring farm was seen chasing them all over the playing field. Cigarette in mouth, Gordon confronted it with a school tractor and persuaded the beast to return to its farm. The rest of the summer term passed peacefully enough, with its rituals of cricket matches, cream teas, and sports days. The maths teacher had found a woman in Winchester to cycle to on Thursday nights. I tried to follow his lead by borrowing his bicycle and fruitlessly hanging around Southampton's only rhythm and blues club on Tuesday evenings. Gordon spent much time at the local pub, from which he would return, raving about Wellington, Napier, and Kitchener. The junior French master perfected his space rocket and presented it to the school at the end of term prize giving. The summer holiday had finally arrived. My time at Westcliffe was over. A few months later, now a university student, I was drinking coffee in the Union Bar and talking to a draft dodger from the USA when I noticed an article in a national paper. It described a court case in which a teacher at Westcliffe School had been convicted of arson. Gordon had, according to the article, set fire to a barn in which was stored the school tractor, lawnmowers, and the head's car. Letting the blaze get underway, he had evacuated all the vehicles in a precise and efficient manner to a safe place. Not knowing the cause of the fire, everyone had assumed that Gordon had saved the day and had heaped praise upon him. Pleased with his success, Gordon then set fire to the school. Once again, he waited till the blaze was serious before raising the alarm and evacuating the boys to safety with military precision and efficiency. Gordon was the hero of the hour. Everyone was indebted to him forever. 3 days later, he phoned the police and confessed to his crime. I noticed with some sadness as I read through the article that the school, in an effort to vilify him, had brought against him 11 charges of indecent assault. He was found guilty and sentenced to 6 years' imprisonment. I had a moment of sympathy for Gordon. It seemed to me that, in the tiny world of the prep school, he had been the victim of an authoritarian, capitalist machine that had cynically exploited the parents, pupils, and staff so that the boss could reap a fat profit. But by then, I was sitting in a student's coffee bar, wondering whether the state would ever wither away, like Marx said it would, or whether Nietzsche's Superman really did start the Second World War. One thing was certain: I would never again work in the ruthless, cutthroat world of the independent, preparatory boarding school for boys.